Truck Guns, Part 4. I think this is the longest series hitherto on gunfighter life. Today we're going to be talking about what here in America is likely the most common truck gun, because it's one of the most common long guns, the intermediate cartridge carbine or rifle. Most commonly here in America, the AR-15. But today's episode is going to include like the AR-15 variants, the A.K. variants, and some other things. But what's going to characterize today's episode is the intermediate cartridge. Far more powerful than anything we've discussed up to this point on the truck gun series. More than your carry gun, more than your full-size fighting handgun, more than your pistol caliber carbine. Moving up the amount of firepower spectrum. Now, despite what a lot of politicians might have you believe, these black rifles are not particularly powerful in regards to other rifles, but they are more powerful than handguns and PCCs, and they're a good balance of power and shootability. There's a reason they're so prevalent on battlefields today, and have been since kind of lessons learned in World War II, World War I and World War II, and then going into the Cold War. The intermediate cartridge has become a thing, and there's a lot of reason for that. Shootability, portability, the ability to carry lots of ammo, and because of that, especially here in America, economy of scale. That caliber, the 5.56, and we'll talk about other calibers, but the 5.56 and the 7.62 by 39 have become very affordable, very available. The guns, the AR-15, the magazines, right? They, even with inflation, especially if you take away inflation, a good AR-15 today is way more affordable than they were in the 80s, in the 90s. Right? Because there are so many, they are so prevalent. They are kind of America's rifle. They may not stand for America's rifle, but they may as well. The AR may as well stand for America's rifle. It's so common here. Even if there were no other good reasons, and there are several which we'll go over, that would be a big reason why it would be probably one of the number one truck guns, even if it wasn't a great choice, because it's what people have. Just like in days of yore, when I was growing up, it was not uncommon to have somebody with a hunting rifle and a shotgun hanging in the back glass of their truck. That was just a normal thing. Why? Because that's what people had and that's what they used. They were the most common things. Pump shotgun and, let's say, a lever action 30-30 or a bolt action hunting rifle. Those were probably the most common long gun. Well, there's been a shift in urbanization of America, a tacticalization of America, and I'm not against that. You know, I've spent the majority of my adult life as a professional gunfighter, as you know if you listen to the bio. So I'm not against that. I'm just saying that is the most common rifle of today. So for that reason alone, it likely ends up in a lot of vehicles. It's what people have, it's what they shoot, it's what they're familiar with. That intermediate caliber cartridge. But this is a truck gun episode, so I don't want to get off on too many tangents. Let's talk about intermediate caliber rifle/carbines and their advantages or disadvantages as truck guns. Again, they're readily available, they're affordable. There's been a lot of innovation, especially on the AR-15. So easy to mount optics, right? When I went to war in Iraq, Marine Corps Infantry, our first tour for the initial invasion, we had iron-sighted M16A2s. We've come a long way since then. Most ARs that you're going to get today are going to come with a flat top upper, the ability to mount good quality modern optics, which is a good force multiplier. You can still rock the iron sights if you want. I love iron sights. And I think a good rifleman should know how to shoot with iron sights. But an optic is a force multiplier. The ability to easily mount good optics. That's a big deal. That's a lot of innovation. The modularity and even if you're just talking about the, at this point dated quad rail, but was kind of revolutionary for its time, whether it's a quad rail or you're on Team M-Lock or Key Mod or whatever. It doesn't really matter as much as marketing hype would have you believe. As long as you can mount a white light on it and whatever accessories you want, like a sling attachment point, which can literally be a piece of 550 cord, there's a lot of utility there as opposed to the old just regular handguards. The free float thing is nice, maybe or maybe not necessary for a truck gun, but the ability to mount a white light and things like that, right? That's a big deal. That's a lot of advantage. There's a lot of utility for a white light in kind of common defensive scenarios with a carbine. And here also for the truck gun. Don't use it to change your tire on the side of the road while it's attached to your gun, but you get a lot of utility with that and the modularity. There's a lot of advantage there. One of the most accessorizable guns. What do they call it? The Barbie for men. It's kind of funny, but the point is you can buy the Barbie Jeep and the Barbie Dream House for your AR. You can go crazy with that thing if you want. I would say there's kind of a temptation to go a little bit too crazy. I think you need a good reliable AR, a good optic, good backup iron sights, a good sling, a good white light, and you're ready to rock and roll. Oh, good magazines, I guess I should mention that. But the ability of them, the ability to have so many good options and good aftermarket options and aftermarket good magazines, even better than the military ones. Unless you're talking about the Marine Corps, switch to the PMags, which is pretty awesome. But you get the idea. They're affordable, they're available, they're customizable as far as the AR-15 goes. If you talk about the AK variants, well, what's awesome about these? Well, I don't want to turn this into an episode on the 5.56 versus the 7.62x39. I've done episodes like that, the AR versus the AK. But I think for this application, and in general, if I'm being honest, if I'm looking at the numbers and the data, the 7.62x39 is a better intermediate cartridge, period. It has its disadvantages. It's not as lightweight, right? It's not as high velocity, which does have its own advantages. But I think as far as a best all-around intermediate cartridge, the 7.62x39 is better. You get that with the AK, unless you're getting an AK in some other caliber, but I'm talking most common. You get that 7.62x39. Better barrier penetration, which, again, if it's a truck gun, it's likely that you'll have to shoot out of your vehicle, like through your vehicle, and or into somebody else's vehicle. I think the 7.62x39 is better at that. I think it's a better cartridge for that. It has more mass. About the most common 5.56, 55 grain. If you're talking a little bit heavier, 62 grain. If you're talking about the massive Mark II 62 at 77 grains. Okay, the old school, what the AK has been using for decades and decades and decades, what radical Islamic jihadists have been using to try and kill Christians. You're talking about run-of-the-mill 7.62x39. It's 123 grain, 122, 123 grain. It's a bigger bullet. Bigger bullet, more mass, moderate velocity. That tends to penetrate well. It has its advantages. Again, I think it's a better all-around cartridge for intermediate cartridge. I think it's a better hunting cartridge than 5.56, not than a lot of other cartridges. But we see that here. I think it has some advantages here. You also get the advantage of the AK. The AK, again, is prolific on the battlefields, from radical Islamic jihadists trying to cut Christians' heads off with dull knives. It's a world that we live in. Let's not forget that there are people like that. To, sadly, child soldiers in Africa, to people fighting in the Ukraine on both sides, right? The AK is prolific. It's battle-proven. If there ever was a battle-proven firearm, it's the AK-47. From jungles to deserts to... is there an environment that it hasn't served in? Maybe Antarctica? Right? It's a battle-proven weapon. So you get that. You get that. Another thing that categorizes this class of weapons, standard, not high capacity, standard magazines are 30 rounds, right? 30 and 30. Might argue the original standard for the M16 was 20 rounds, and I like 20 round mags for a lot of reasons. But either way, high capacity. So you got that going for you. You have a fair amount of firepower. They're very shootable. That's one of went to intermediate cartridges as opposed to full-powered rifle cartridges, they're more shootable. You get less recoil compared to a full-house rifle cartridge like a 30-06 or a 308. Very good balance of firepower versus mobility. If it's doubling as a bug-out bag gun, a bug-out gun, then yeah, that plays a factor. Also, going back to the AK-47, one of the big disadvantages you might get here is, like it or not, and I don't think it's fair, but I think that it is, and I'm not here to pee on you and tell you that it's raining. I'm here to tell you the truth. Here in America, we see A.K.s largely as a bad guy gun. And again, it's not fair because A.K.s are just tools. They're no better or worse evil or good than an AR-15 or your grandpappy's lever action 30-30, but that's the way they're perceived. That's the way the media paints them. That's the color that they're under. That's the ensign that they ride under. Meaning if you have to use one and the men with 10 stars show up, usually the perception is bad guy. That's a bad guy gun. Again, may not be fair, may not be right, but I'm just here to tell you what I think is. Somebody that's served in a lot of different roles, worn a lot of different hats, literally. It's perceived by a lot of people in the general public, I think, as a bad guy gun. So, if you're going to go that route, really consider that. You may want to go with an AK that doesn't look like an AK, a A.K.s. For a long time, I had a A.K.s pistol back when they were legal, way back in the day, like a year ago, when they were legal, but I had this years before that. A A.K.s 7.62x39 with a brace. One of the cool things about the AK platform as opposed to the AR platform is the AR platform has a buffer tube. The AK doesn't need a buffer tube, meaning you can fold the stock, and you can get folding stock ARs, but you can't fire them like that. It's pretty handy to have a maneuverable gun like that you can maneuver inside a vehicle and still fire if you have to, that will operate with a folded stock. A.K.s doesn't really look like an AK, and I doubt many people that aren't gun nuts, if they looked at one, would think it was an AK. But they absolutely are an AK. They're absolutely reliable. They're built very well. That Galil, especially the pistol, is a good I guess it was a good option when you could get the pistol brace. Now maybe the full size is a better option. But A.K.s doesn't really look like an AK. So if you want an AK that's really good, rock solid, dependable, made to really good standards, and made by an ally, Israel, you may consider the A.K.s. In fact, that was one of my truck guns back when I was doing a lot of stuff in government rides. I needed one that would fit into a bag handily, that wouldn't show, that would be in a normal size bag, not like a rifle case. I was doing a lot of stuff in and around civilians, in and around the general population in government rides, and I needed a covert amount of firepower. I settled on that A.K.s, and I settled on it in 7.62x39 as opposed to 5.56. Either one would have been okay, but I think, again, in this realm, for me, that caliber has more advantage than disadvantage. But these aren't the only two players on the field. There are plenty of other good intermediate caliber options for this. One that comes to mind is often forgotten is the VZ58. Light, handy, would be a great truck gun. And I recorded an episode, but it hasn't come out yet because there's just been so much other stuff coming out. But on the S.K.s, a great all-around gun. If you're not just into the tactical, urban, suburban, I live in a cul-de-sac, but I'm ready to be Rambo. There's nothing wrong with that. We should watch and be ready. But if you also hunt and you spend a lot of time in rural areas and you want a good balance of all-around carbine, I think the S.K.s is phenomenal. And not when you tactical Barbie it up. When you just leave it the way that it is. A good N.R.A, a good Russian-made S.K.s. I'd leave out the Yugo. I'm not a big fan of those. Overly complicated. But a good Russian or Chinese S.K.s. The way that it's made to be a good battlefield infantry rifle. Also a good hunting gun. I've said it before. When I grew up, they were kind of like the poor man's deer hunting rifle. Not because they're the best deer hunting rifle, but because they're affordable and they work. Again, that cartridge, it works. That gun, it works. It works the way that it's designed with 10-round stripper clips. If you learn how to reload a stripper clip, you can reload them pretty quickly. And not as good a battlefield weapon as an AK-47, but the AK-47 is not as good a hunting rifle as the S.K.s in regards to sights and barrel length and a bunch of other things, the way that they handle. So of a good all-around rifle and a good truck gun, the S.K.s, don't forget about it. Also a really good crossover. A really good crossover is in this realm. If you want to stay away from the tactical because of the way it's perceived because of just your lifestyle, whatever it is, or you live in Canada, or you live in New York or New Jersey or somewhere like that, where maybe any of those more modern options are malum prohibitum, you may look at a lever action 30-30. I think 30-30 absolutely is an intermediate cartridge. I think it's America's first intermediate cartridge by a long shot. It's a great round. If you look at it ballistically, it's not the same because you're talking Spitzer bullet versus round nose bullets and things, but ballistically pretty comparable to 7.62 by 39. And a lot of the ammunition you're going to get for 30-30 is going to be good quality hunting ammo, which means it's going to be great on soft targets. 30-30, a lever action 30-30 has decent capacity. It doesn't have the rate of fire of a semi-auto, but it's got a lot higher rate of fire than a lot of other guns. And there's a lot of utility there for a truck gun. Just a good iron sight. Winchester 94 or Marlin 336. The Marlin 336 lends itself better to optics. So if you want to get a 336 and throw an LPVO on it or a red dot, there's nothing heretical in my opinion about that. A good lever action 30-30 is a good truck gun. Has been for a long time, continues to be so. Those are really good crossovers. Getting more into the tactical, let's not forget also the Mini 14. The Mini 14s are awesome. I use the Mini 14 in a professional context. I used them as a police officer. They were still in inventory. We had M16s. We had fully auto, like Car 15 M16 variants. I had access to all that and access to like full auto subguns. A lot of times I just grab the Mini 14. I like the way that it handles. I like the way that it shoots. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm going to tell you, full auto is almost useless in most military police contexts except for very, very niche applications. Full auto think that it's really cool, but from somebody that shot a lot of full auto and a lot of machine guns, it's not that cool. It's cool just for fun, but as far as actually effective, not super effective unless you're talking about a tripod or vehicle-mounted belt-fed system. You're talking about a shoulder-fired system, honestly not super effective in most situations. Not when you're responsible and you are morally responsible for every round fired. Just on a battlefield where all the enemy is in the easterly direction and you can just shoot anything over there, right? That's generally not the context we find ourselves in a modern CONUS defensive context. So, anyway, went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but the Mini 14 is a great, handy little carbine. It's called the ranch rifle, right? Some of those variants, the ranch rifle. So if you live on a ranch, you're talking about a truck gun like that, that makes a lot of sense. And they also make the Mini 30. I think I've said before, I think the Mini 30, which fires 7.62 by 39, is perhaps one of the best all-around, like, bug-out guns. Apocalypse End of the World guns, you get one of those, you put an LPVO on it, because that's one of the big advantages to the AK. You can mount optics on AKs, you can mount optics on Galils, but the solutions are not great. It's not nearly as rock solid. The Mini 14 comes with a good solid, I think they even come with scope rings. You can mount a good quality modern LPVO very easily. And I say do that. That's a great option. A Mini 30 or a Mini 14 with a good LPVO, that's a really, really good option. And it doesn't look nearly as bad guy-ish in our society as an AK-47. If you're talking about a Mini 30, you're talking about basically the same amount of firepower, pretty much the same kind of reload, same style of reload. The Rock and Lock magazine system. It's a good system. I'm a fan of the Mini 14. I'm a fan of the Mini 30. Mini 30 is a great gun, and it comes in stainless, which if you listen, you know I'm a big fan of stainless. So don't forget about the Mini 30 and the Mini 14. Awesome, awesome options. Also, one may be forgotten about, and I think I've realized this recently. Maybe some people don't trust Kel-Tec, and maybe I should do a whole Kel-Tec episode like Kel-Tec's cool, but can you trust them, or something like that. Now, to be fair, Kel-Tec does a lot of this to itself because they make just off-the-wall stuff like bullpup shotguns. First of all, why? Just why? But they really do a lot of kind of off-the-wall stuff, and I commend them for doing really cool, unique guns. However, they're a small company, and I don't think they get a lot of the R&D put into certain models before they release them. Some of their models aren't super reliable, like bullpup shotgun or the Kel-Tec PMR 30. However, some of their models are super reliable. Really good guns and really good values of guns, like the PF9, the P3AT. Those are good, reliable, affordable guns. The Kel-Tec Sub 2000, which I think we mentioned in the pistol caliber carbine episode. Super reliable, super affordable. They've been around a long time. They're a good, simple blowback, simple operation gun. They're affordable, they're reliable. There's nothing wrong with those models. And what brings us back to the intermediate cartridge, they have the SU16. There's a bunch of letter designations that I'm not super familiar with. I have some experience, some first-hand experience with the Kel-Tecs. I never run those professionally, but I have run them and worked with them, and I think they're a good, reliable design. I don't think they get the credit they deserve. Going back to the folding thing, they don't have a buffer tube, unlike the AR, so you can shoot them with a stock folded. They go pretty small. Also, they're very light. They're much lighter than most. You can get super light ARs, but they're lighter than the average AR. So if this is going to double as a bug-out bag gun, a bailout bag gun, a duffel bag gun, you might really look at the Kel-Tec SU16. It's also a piston system, which I don't like direct impingement. They work. You can get them to work. You can get really reliable ones, but they're not my favorite system. The Kel-Tec is a piston system. And again, they're light, they're handy. You can mount good optics on them. You can fire them with the stock folded. There's a lot of advantage to the SU16 in this kind of context. You know, are they going to have the sustained rate of fire of a SOCOM profile barrel Colt M4? No. But how many mags are you dumping through a Kel-Tec SU16? And if you're doing that, you're probably doing it because you want to break it. That's not what we're talking about here in a truck gun context, right? You're talking about convoy operations, which if you have listened to other episodes, you know I was a urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I get all about convoy operations and things like that. But for you, truck gun is probably going to be to stop an active shooter or to break contact, escape an evasion. Out of a sticky situation, you're probably not doing mag dumps. If you want a gun to do mag dumps, then get an AK or an AR. But I think for a lot of practical reasons, the SU16 or a Mini 14 or things like that are going to be just as good, and in some cases, maybe even better for what you're trying to do. Don't make the mistake, the Navy SEAL fallacy, I'll call it that, because a Navy SEAL runs a SIG 226 that I got to have a 226, and then I'll be a Navy SEAL. It doesn't work like that. It's like me saying Jimi Hendrix played a Fender Stratocaster, and I don't know what he played, right? I don't know guitars. I know the Fender Stratocaster. But if he did in fact play a Fender Stratocaster, the fact that he played it and made it sound really good doesn't mean that it's the best guitar for me. I might be better off with a Les Paul. And the fact that I get a Fender is not going to make me Jimi Hendrix, right? So don't fall into that with the guns like Navy SEALs use a SOCOM profile. Colt M4, so I gotta have that. And by proxy, I'll be a Navy SEAL. But you won't. And don't make the mistake of thinking that you're doing the same things a Navy SEAL is going to do, or a Marine Corps infantryman. This is bigger than this one episode, but what are you going to be doing with the gun? What is important to you? Is a folding stock and able to fit it under a seat important to you? Something Navy SEALs and Marine Corps infantrymen and private contractors and special assignments in law enforcement. One thing they have in common is they do look at mission parameters and mission specific stuff. And if they have opportunity, they'll pick gear that is good for that mission. What's your mission, men? What are you trying to accomplish? And what's the best gun for that? Anyway, wrapping up intermediate caliber carbines. They're a really good balance of firepower and mobility. They're very prevalent today, so economy of scale, you get a lot of value there. You get decent capacity. Something I didn't mention, but I should have, you get decent range, like point blank range. Meaning the distance you can zero your rifle for and aim at the center of mass and expect to hit a target. It's a lot farther than any of the options we've discussed thus far, than a handgun, than a pistol caliber carbine. Also round per round more effective than options we've discussed so far. Not than options we'll discuss in the future, but again, it's a good balance of firepower, mobility, capacity, economy of scale. The 5.56 and the 7.62 by 39 are both decent intermediate calibers. There are others. I mentioned the 30-30. There are other intermediate calibers. You may decide you're the 300 blackout guy or you're the 6.8 SPC guy. But all those intermediate cartridges, they have a lot in common. Good balance of firepower versus mobility. Generally much higher velocity than handgun rounds. And there's a lot of advantage there. So there's a lot of advantage to these for a truck gun. Are they the right truck gun for you? Again, you do your own mission analysis. Gather your own intel. Where do you live? Do you live in rural Wyoming? Do you live in Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex? Live in Seattle, Washington? Do you live in Southern California? Do you live in the North Woods of Maine? You do your own kind of research. Do you live in Canada? Do you live in South Africa? Right, that changes things. By God's grace, I know we have listeners from all over. Italy. You do your own analysis. Mission, enemy, terrain. MET-TC. Do your own analysis and figure out what's best for you. Is the intermediate carbine best for you, for your truck gun, your trunk gun? What kind of vehicle do you drive? That's another part of that goes into your MET-TC. What's best for you? Maybe it's best for you just because you have the most experience with it. You're a vet of the global war on terror, and that's like the only rifle you've ever really had any real experience in training with. Honest with yourself, you're not going to go out and put hundreds of hours into another platform. So, yeah, that might be the best one just by default for you because it's what you're familiar with. Anyway, just some thoughts on the intermediate carbines for truck guns. With that, your tactical tip of the day. Tactical tip of the day, a tire repair kit. You might think, wait, we're supposed to be talking about tactical stuff. I'm getting ready for the end of the world, man. Well, it would really suck bugging out the end of the world and you got a flat tire. Absolutely practical, tactical. Tire repair kit and or a spare tire and or a way to inflate a tire. Right. I think that's a manly skill that you should know. Everybody, absolutely. I think every man considers himself a warrior should know how to shoot and run a gun, handgun, rifle, shotgun. I agree with that. I also agree you should know how to change a freaking tire and patch a tire. That's also really important. Talking about truck guns or trunk guns, have a spare tire, know how to change a tire, know how to patch a tire. Hopefully your car has a spare tire, but even if it does, sometimes it's safer, just depending on the side of the road and the environment, to just patch it real quick. A tire repair kit is not that expensive. Fix a flat to reinflate it is not that expensive. Also, little emergency air compressors you can plug into the outlet in your car and slowly inflate a tire. Those things can come in really handy. I've used all those things before. They come in really handy. Don't just think about, I got my carbine, I got my bailout bag, and got my gas mask, but you have no way to plug a flat tire. I would say your priorities probably need adjusting. Because even in really bad times, you can still get a flat tire, and that might really hurt you. Anyway, tactical tip of the day out of the way. Tactical verse of the day. I was reading this morning in Matthew, and very fitting for today's episode. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour the Lord is coming. And again, therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming. Thanks for listening. Have a blessed day.